All right, Rufus, you and Deborah quit having a little tete-a-tete.
You're right, you're exactly right.
My
You
two
guys-
favorite people out there. Watch this now. We're out of executive session and we're back in the general session. We have already begun the meeting and we have already adopted the agenda. So, may I please have the invitation, Lori?
You may. If you'll bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, as we gather today at this meeting, we pray that you will be in our midst. Lord, we all know that change is difficult. We ask that you help us make decisions that will be pleasing to you and in the best interest of the South Carolinians we serve with disabilities and special needs. Lord, I thank you for every seat that is filled here today, for these are the people who have shown a commitment to help the population we have been called to serve. Collectively and individually, we seek your clarity and your guidance. Help us make this meeting productive and keep those we serve at the forefront of our minds. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
May I have an introduction of guests, and I want to start up here with Rufus. Nope. I hide behind that. Okay.
Stephen Jones, DDSN.
Great, thank you.
Rufus Britt, DDSN.
Rob McBurney, DDSN.
Pat Manley, DDSN.
Susan Beck, DDSN. Lisa Weeks, DDSN.
Deborah and Heather McPherson, Richland County.
Tricia Harrison. Sprinkle. Beth Franco, TNA.
Melvin Robinson, DHHS.
Doris Davis, Brain Injury Association of South Carolina.
Melissa Ritter, DDSN.
Could you do me a favor? I can't see you. Would you just stand so I could see the one who's there? Two people. Oh, very nice. Okay.
Kelly Cox, Ad Coach.
Alfredia Stevenson, Chester, Lancaster.
Thank you.
Brooke Russell, Backup Center.
Good morning, Mike Keith, Marion Dillon, DSN.
Susan John, Horry County.
Beth Bungie, Bright Start.
Sarah Brownson, Spinal Cord Injury Association.
Dale Purvis, DSN.
Michelle Schaefer, Max Abilities of York County.
Mike Moss, Calvin County.
Ben Warner, DSN.
Terry Mines, Oconee, DSN.
Kathleen Lamb, Agent McClare.
Great, thank you. Welcome. The approval of the minutes of February 22nd, 2000 commission meeting. May I have a motion?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, public input. Deborah McPherson.
Yes.
I want to bring to the Commission's attention 3 legislative bills that I've attended subcommittee meetings this past month. House Bill 3602, House Bill 3273, and House Bill 3825. House Bill 3602 and 3825 propose making changes to the Adult Health Care Consent Act. House Bill 3273 would establish a vulnerable adult maltreatment registry. House Bill 3602, sponsored by Representative Seth Rose, would amend the Adult Health Care Consent Act by adding a final category to the order of priority, allowing a person with an established relationship with a patient to make health care decisions for patients unable to consent. This proposed legislation is being supported by the South Carolina Hospital Association. The bill was presented to the House Special Laws Subcommittee on February 27th. An amendment was made to the proposed legislation following public input and was supported by the subcommittee by a vote of 4-1. This proposed legislation was amended as follows. A person who has an established relationship with a patient who's acting in good faith on behalf of the patient, who can reliably convey the patient's wishes, but who is not a paid caregiver or a provider of health care services to the patient. For the purposes of this paragraph, a person with an established relationship is an adult who has exhibited special care and concern for the patient, who is generally familiar with the patient's health care views and desires, and is willing and able to provide, to become involved in the patient's health care decisions and to act in the patient's best interest. The person with an established relationship shall sign and date an acknowledgement form provided by the hospital or other healthcare facility in which the patient is located. for placement in the patient's record certifying that he or she meets criteria. Amy Smith, a neighbor of Representative Rose, encouraged him to sponsor House Bill 3602. She's an attorney working for Parker Poe Law Firm, and she moved not long ago to Columbia from North Carolina, where she taught disability law. She indicated at the subcommittee meeting that North Carolina and 34 other states have consent statutes that allow a close friend to provide consent for those patients unable to consent when no family member is willing or able to provide consent. She stated at the hearing that this change to the Adult Healthcare Consent Act would not impact DDSN. She also indicated that she does not support giving DDSN and its providers authority to make healthcare decisions because of the issue of conflict of interest. Following the hearing, I looked up and reviewed the statutes in the 35 states and found that 10 of the 35 have restrictions such as not allowing removal of life support, not allowing sterilization or treatment of mental health disorder, limited to life sustaining procedures or DNR, or admission to a nursing home or community-based residential facility. 12 of the 35 states require written statements from the individual claiming to be a close friend with penalty of perjury for false claims. 16 of the 35 statutes do not allow an owner, operator, or an employee of the healthcare facility where the patient is receiving care to be surrogate healthcare decision-making. House Bill 3602 has not been presented to the House Judiciary Committee yet, and there has not been companion legislation introduced in the Senate. House Bill 3273 would establish a vulnerable adult maltreatment registry was also presented for public comment on February 27th by the House Judiciary Special Law Subcommittee. This legislation is being supported by the South Carolina Adult Protection Coordinating Council, SLED, and other advocates. Because of expressed concerns by the Healthcare Association, the bill was tabled for further study. Then just yesterday, House Bill 3825, sponsored by Representatives Bill Taylor and Weston Newton, was reviewed by the Health and Environmental Affairs Subcommittee of the House 3M Committee. This legislation, if passed, would give authority to DDS and its providers as temp after families in making healthcare decisions for individuals with intellectual and related disabilities. I have concern that the proposed legislation does not provide explicit directions for obtaining consent from the next of kin, documenting attempts to contact family members, and provide penalties when providers fail to notify and obtain consent from available family members who are willing to make healthcare decisions. Because of time, the subcommittee did not take any action regarding House Bill 3825. And finally, because individuals with Down syndrome have 3 copies of Chromosome 21, March 21st is celebrated as World Down Syndrome Day. And I'd like to ask y'all to please join us, and I see many of you have your ribbons on, in celebrating the contributions that they make to our communities and families. And I want to share I have many Heather stories, but I remember when she was little and she had lost a tooth. The tooth fairy had put money under her pillow, and she goes to church. And the next thing I know, she takes a little pew card out and starts writing. And she said, "Pastor Crow, God gives to us, we give to others." And she put her tooth fairy money in the offering plate. So those are things that I remember about Heather and all the things that she gives to us as a family and to the other people that she meets. And so I just ask you to celebrate today.
Thank you so much. Patricia Harrison.
I have some handouts. Dr. Poole, Shana Rammel, Richard Thompson. And Mr. Broughton, I'm sorry, I was thinking that you were no longer, because you moved to 96 on the commission, so maybe Sandra can make you a copy of that. I'd like to talk today about what I see as a crisis coming. I'm hearing, I still attend plans across the state, and I am hearing from service coordinators fear that many of the service coordination providers are going to be going out of business with something that seems to have been I know there have been some discussions about case management, but it seems, they feel like they have been surprised by all this. And my concern about this from my people's perspective is that there's going to be less choice of service coordinators. I know in the past when there have been some complaints, the board has propped one provider up by helping them with their mortgage payment. They have bought administrative buildings for some providers. And one of those providers provides excellent service, but we're not going to have choice in South Carolina until the playing field's level and until they're able to direct bill. You know, this commission still does not allow providers to direct bill. It's in the federal law. It's not questionable, but this agency still, and HHS, to put the blame on it, HHS still does not allow the direct billing. Well, how would that affected the case management situation? I have in here, starting on around page 20, this is a detailed claims report where HHS is asking my now deceased client to pay back $250 a month for case management services. So why is it that if HHS was paying $250 a month, you folks out there were getting $100 to $138 a month? So there's been a gross difference in what DDSN has been receiving, or at least what DHH has been billing the federal government. And this is not new. You know, Deborah shared with me as CMS director from 2008, which prohibited bundled services. I met with Emma Fortner and I said, Emma, this is going to be a problem because you're going to be asking these people to pay back what you're getting, not what these people out here who are doing the work are doing. So I'm very concerned about the loss of good providers. I've had some excellent service providers with my people, and they're only getting, it appears, about half of what is being paid for that service. I have in here the waiver amendment that was submitted, I think first in 2014, and if you'll follow me here for just a minute, if you'll look at page 3, DDSN and HHS said that the face-to-face contact, the cost was $36 a unit and $31 for non-face-to-face. Then if you look at year 2, according to this waiver document, which the South Carolina Supreme Court says is law, it supersedes federal or state law according to the court. They should have been able to bill $30.71 for face-to-face, $23 for non-face-to-face in year 2. If we look at year 3 on page 9, the waiver document, which the Court of Appeals has said this is law because DDSN and HHS argued that this is law, they were able to bill, it went down to $25.20 and $15 for non-face-to-face. Did any of your costs go down by that much in that year? So what I'm seeing is that there's no correlation between cost and between what DDSN is receiving and between what these people out here who are doing the work are receiving. We need to have public hearings on this. The people, I happen to find out about it because I've had several providers come to me saying, we've got people that are leaving, they're afraid their jobs are going to be gone come, is it June or July 1st? We're losing the brightest and the best because they're not going to wait till then when they're not getting enough money to provide this service. We need public hearings. The public needs to know what's going to happen on case management. Other issue with case management is that DDSN has been training case managers just to, and this therapy, which never was approved by the commission that I recall, all they do is they send people to the workshops, even though the Court of Appeals said in 2014, you may not impose the caps on people who are at risk of institutionalization. Service coordinators across the state are still saying, well, that's the cap. So there isn't training which comes from this organization to the case managers about what all the feasible alternatives are. And I just think the public needs to know about this, Tasami. We need to have public hearings, and it needs to not be what I think a lot of providers are feeling like it's being shoved down their throats. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Susan John?
Hello, my name is Susan John, the Executive Director of the Horry County Disabilities and Special Needs Board, also the Chair of the South Carolina Human Service Providers Association. Today, though, I am speaking on behalf of Horry County Disabilities and Special Needs, who provides HASKI case management services in 3 counties. Horry County DSN began providing HASKI case management services when the program began in the early 2000s under the direction of the late Dr. Linda Valdier. Due to the limited number of individuals receiving services at that time, DDSN selected a handful of providers to provide case management to their own counties as well as the surrounding counties in their area, in an effort to maximize the specialty for training and services needs as it related to consumers with head and spinal cord injuries. This model of service delivery continues today. Approximately 3 years ago, under the direction of the previous state director and during a time when gas prices were at their highest, a survey of all state case management providers was completed to see if there were other providers in our network who would jump into the pond in providing case management to HASKI consumers. The results of the survey strongly denoted that no other providers, both private and board providers, elected to learn the intricacies of the HASKI service population. What this has led to is that, again, a handful of board providers and a few private providers are the only providers of case management for the specialized service needs of the HASKI population. This led DDSN to implement a process whereby providers of case management would receive a very small monthly stipend of $12.50 per consumer per month to offset the cost of the extended travel to meet face-to-face with consumers. Last month, Director Poole stated in the case management meeting that once the market rate changes in July of 2019, this process of receiving the $12.50 per consumer per month would cease. Last month, I reported the number of providers in the state who were potentially going to be significantly affected by the rate change and the tsunami that is on the horizon. The data received this month again shows that not one single provider in the state will bill sufficient to be sustainable. The average provider market rate is 50.4%. Again, Horry County is the 6th highest in the state at 70% of the current rate. This will mean a significant financial loss to our agency if we do not increase the level of units billed. With the reduction of the $12.50 per consumer, this will be an additional loss of $10,000 per year for us. Although that does not seem like a great deal of money, it certainly offsets some of the gas costs associated with going from Horry County to Marion and to Georgetown counties. The larger concern also stems with the amount of travel time it will take a HASKI case manager to go from Horry to Marion or Georgetown counties to meet face-to-face with consumers. It's not uncommon for travel time to the farthest areas of both counties to be 2 hours one way. Compound that 2 hours at his 4 hours round trip, that is absolutely non-billable time. If we as agencies are being asked to change our business plans, how can this model of service delivery be sustainable? We are being set up to fail from the get-go. We are being told repeatedly that we're going to be held accountable to our contracts with DDSN. As a provider, this is unacceptable unless DDSN pays an additional offset rate to those providers who are providing HASKI services. We do not have a choice with this service delivery model as there are too few and no additional providers who want to learn the specialty of HASKI services. Recently, DDSN State Office sent a request to all providers to submit a case management transition plan by March 31 of 2019. How is it possible for a provider of case management to submit a plan when the waiver case management manual has not even been received by those of us who are providing services? Logically and rationally, I will not be able to comply with this request until I have had an opportunity to see what changes are truly being expected under the new waiver guidelines. Commissioners, I ask and I urge you to truly delve into the intricacies of what is happening with case management and the long-term effects that it's going to have on our entire system. You have an opportunity to affect change, and I hope that you will work with DDSN administration to make decisions that are in the absolute best interest of our entire system. If not, the tsunami that I spoke about last month is looming closer and closer, and the losers will be the people that we are tasked with providing services to. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much. Beth Bunge?
Mary.
Good morning. Happy Little Down Syndrome Day. I'm Beth Bunge with Bright Start, and we are a private provider of case management, early intervention, and speech therapy services in South Carolina. We currently serve over 3,300 individuals and their families, of which 2,049 receive case management, and we've provided it for about 18 years. We've been told for years that waiver case management would go to the $25.15 per unit rate. This is not new news. We have been told to prepare, to gather data, have had billing trainings provided by central office, and have been encouraged to express our concerns of the rate change to our local legislators. These suggestions were made in order to help make the transition to unit based billing. While there were ongoing conversations as to whether or not the rate was really going to go to unit-based or monthly rate, we were told a change was going to occur. We made the mistake last year of continuing to provide services in the same way we have been for years and expecting a different outcome. We're now in a critical time in case management, and Director Poole has been nothing but honest and forthcoming, in our opinion, of information that she's been able to share regarding the changes coming to case management. From what we've been told, she's lobbied for a higher rate with the director of DHHS, but the data from case management providers to support her argument was not there. We are thankful that Director Poole has started meetings for each program and has invited everyone who wants to attend. We've been attending the monthly EI and case management work groups, and during these meetings, Director Poole has listened, asked questions, and gave answers. We know that there are other providers in the system who are willing to expand their program into other areas should a board decide not to continue to provide case management services. There may be some very rural counties in our state that need our support, but they should not be the norm. The overall responsibility of being a case management provider is to figure out how to provide the service in a way that is sustainable and meets the needs of the consumers in each area. Board and private providers who do not think they're going to be able to maintain their case management program after July 1st need to do the responsible thing and start planning now on how they're going to transition their families. Our responsibility is to make sure the individuals and families we serve are provided for no matter what the system is going through. Last week, we were part of facilitating a 3-hour case management session at the Human Service Provider Conference in Myrtle Beach with 84 attendees. We discussed strategies and we brainstormed ideas to improve case management. I have to say that most in the room were case managers and supervisors, and not one person said this can't be done. They were positive and extremely thankful for the information, and in fact, there were so many requests for another session that we planned one for April. This state has many amazing case managers who want to continue to provide quality services for their families. Our intent at Bright Start is to provide services that build better relationships with individuals and their families, support individuals in a way that they have never been supported before, and truly focus on consumers and their needs as we move forward. We hope that the rest of the providers in the state join us in creating a system that lets go of how things used to be done and look forward to how things can be done. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Commissioners update. Any commissioners have an update? Okay.
So the first was personally went to the legislature when the subcommittee was meeting with regard to the qualifications on who could become a commission member. There was a proposal essentially that limited that down to either a family member who provided long-term support to a person who was receiving services, or somebody who was directly in the industry, basically, whose job was within the industry that was directly related to DDSN. I went, they had a meeting, They spent an awful lot of time talking about tanning beds, and never got to, and basically they adjourned right before they got to that particular proposal. There hasn't been a rescheduled date on that. When that comes up, I will try to make an appearance. I did submit a written summary of what my comments were going to be for them, and that has been provided to the members of the subcommittee, and if possible, I'll be making that appearance. So I just want to give everybody the update on that. If anybody has an opinion on that, the opinion that I was expressing was my own. And if there's any commission member that wants me to provide anything on their behalf or has an opinion on that, please let me know, and I'll be happy to share that when I make that appearance. The second thing that I actually want to do is a little bit brighter, in that I want to brag on a couple of the local members who receive services through disabilities and special needs who are participating at the International Special Olympics in Abu Dhabi, actually going on right now. One is Josh Myers, who is the son of the Myers, who I actually got to serve with when I was on the York County Board. Josh has been extremely active in Special Olympics for his whole life, and actually he has won a gold medal, a silver medal, and 2 bronze medals at the international games this year.
He does powerlifting.
Yeah, powerlifting. Yeah, I mean he's a big guy, and he lifts a lot more weight than I ever can. We also have another York County resident, Scott Rohr, who won a bronze in golf. And so I just wanted to brag a little bit on a couple of our consumers up in York County who are representing us quite well internationally at the Special Olympics.
All right, Mary, State Director.
Thank you. And I'll brag on Scott too. Scott Rohr, he was with his dad. They have Rohr Tree Service up in our county, and he's the one that came out and took the tree off my house when it fell. And Scott was out there with the chainsaw, and I mean, he's a hard worker. So it was, yes, and it was the only company that would come and help at the time. Today is, like Deborah Fierce said, and all the stuff says, World Down Syndrome Day. The 3rd month, the 21st day, trisomy 21, blue and yellow colors and crazy socks, because they kind of look like chromosomes under a microscope after they've been stained, marks the day. So Down syndrome has a little special place in my heart too. Okay, we had a couple of questions from commissioners, and I thought I'd just go ahead and make my report answering those, because I'm going to do an update on the case management issue later on. The commission approved a plan of action and response that went to the House Oversight Committee back in August of 2018. Pat Malley actually wrote that plan, and I'm going to allow him to make an update on that report when we get to that strategic plan. That's the strategic plan we're talking about, the plan that went to the Oversight Committee. But right now, the plan said that Mercer would produce a report in the fall recommending future payments, and that Mercer would update the DSN service rates with the report due in early, actually I think it was the fall of 2018. We were supposed to get it in October, then I went to November, then I went to December. Well, the fact is, I don't own that report. HHS owns the report, and they're paying the consultant to set the to set our rates and provide input on the band system. HHS has the report in draft and is working with Mercer to finalize that report. DDSN has no certain date of release, but appears to be soon. You know, informal, just talking with them and asking, what do we, tell me a little bit. It looks like the band system is going to be unfavorable, but we also know that part of the Oversight Committee, legislators that should go up there, is they also found that we have to unwind the bands and make payment more transparent, and I agree with that. The second question is an update of the direct care provider staffing crisis at the regional centers. We were supposed to develop a contingency plan if that continued. And Pat and Rufus have worked really hard to come up with a reporting system to capture DSPs, nurses, to work on scheduling at the centers, because that's been an issue. So staffing at each regional center to measure the progress and see how we're going and where we are. Nursing is about 85% of the staffing needs. DSP staffing varies among centers. PD and Midlands appear to be out of the woods. They're over 90%, with PD doing the best. DSP staffing at Midlands, Whitten and Coastal are still in the mid 70% range, with Coastal doing marginally better in February and running 2 orientation classes a month. Whitten having an exceptionally large applicant pool in this last February because they are working very hard and aggressively using ZipRecruiter and all these other, staffing type of, where everybody goes for jobs now on the computer. So instead of just putting an ad out, they're actually getting out there recruiting. And they had a fair the day we were there to visit. They had a job fair. And that place, they had over 40 applicants that day. So they're pushing them through the system. With that being said, so right now we're cautiously optimistic that we are making people accountable for being more aggressive in their recruiting efforts, which I think is very important to do. But we do have contingency plans in place. The worst case scenario at this point is most likely to occur at Whitten Center with moving consumers from Whitten to PD Center, where we have a building that is able to accept 18 consumers. Whitten has the highest census, so which exaggerates their staffing crisis. So there might be to move folks, and hopefully that would be temporary, but we might have to do that. The second contingency, Midlands also has another building, and their staffing numbers are moving nicely. And we're waiting for a building to be overhauled. Once that's done, it opens up another space there. We're kind of hoping to hold that for the triage beds, but if we've got to relieve a staffing crisis, we've got to relieve a staffing crisis. The next item is an update on policy and training on direct care providers' reaction to behaviors leading to arrests. And we are currently updating the abuse neglect training to better fit our learner, the person receiving the information. While that's being done, though, training doesn't stop. We didn't stop doing training. We have increased the number of unannounced facility checks by management, increased supervisor presence in the units, and this is at the regional centers. Staff trainers are being encouraged to train at the point of interaction. So that means while they're up and walking, OJT will occur as they're walking through the building and seeing folks interact with folks or not interacting with folks, conversely. We've encouraged by way of a direct letter from me to all the direct care staff at all the centers, that if they have any questions about anything, I've given them my email number, they can contact me. I'm asking them to go to their supervisors first, but if they're not getting what they need, they're to call me. I've received quite a few thank you letters for that. Just for the contact, I guess. But after the March executive risk management meeting, we'll be sending out a provider bulletin. We're doing the provider bulletins quarterly and the regional centers monthly. They get a risk management report from us on a monthly basis. Then they in turn do their meetings and I get feedback from those meetings. We are also looking at the internal indicators. And with the help of the quality management work group, that's another work group that we've set up. And in fact, it meets tomorrow at 10. We're looking for ways to ensure meaningful care plans and the development of effective internal systems within the provider network. And we want them to look at these indicators to see if it's helping them develop internal systems or they're just running as hard as they can to meet an indicator. And we don't want that to happen. The indicator should drive some performance. The model we have developed to measure the mentor homes will be used to review all high management providers. The fact that we're looking at plans and staffing quality to drive provider improvement, whereas poor alliance scores have not really motivated much of a change. We want to see how we can motivate a change in the system. The next question was an update in the Lawrence County high need bed that was supposed to be operational at the end of 2018. The high needs house has been given to Lawrence DSN board. It was licensed in February. 4 consumers have been identified for placement, 2 from Whitten and 2 from the critical needs list. The update on the establishment of triage beds to address critical cases and also to partner a little bit with DSS to help relieve the population that is sitting at ERs and the emergency room and living in hospitals basically. The development of the triage beds have been slowed down due to a lack of internal funding and the fact that the House budget did not support our request. I have re-engaged with the Senate Finance Committee, hoping that we can kind of ask on that side and see if they can come back together and talk about it again. However, we do have building capacity at PD if we don't use it for the Witten Center move, so we do have beds that can be developed there, or at Midlands once updates are completed with near 100% staffing in both those facilities, so it's not, it wouldn't put more burden on already an issue with staffing. But we've just got finished reviewing all non-service contracts, and we'll be looking at those without measurable outcomes to help fund this if we don't get funding through the state budget system. So that is my director's report.
Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Ritter, of the Brain Injury Awareness Month.
Good morning. In addition to World Down Syndrome Day, today, March is Brain Injury Awareness Month. Governor McMaster has recognized March as Brain Injury Awareness Month. I wanted to let you know that there are more than 60,000 people living in South Carolina with a brain injury related disability. To bring awareness to brain injury this month, we set up the unmasking brain injury displays in the front lobby and here outside. If you haven't looked at those, please take a look before you leave today. This is a national and international project that promotes brain injury awareness and gives survivors a voice. Also, the West End Co-op is back. If you remember from last year, West End Co-op is a small business establishment set up through the Greenville Hospital system. It assists past patients with brain injury with attaining jobs and job skills. And one of those skills is jewelry making. So they have some jewelry available for you to take a look at and possibly purchase today. So take a look before you leave in 249. Finally, the Head and Spinal Cord Injury Division here at DDSN has created a display called The Faces of Brain Injury. These are stories of brain injury survivors who have volunteered to tell their story and have their picture made. So we have a display next door and you can go over and take a look and hear some of these inspiring stories. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. McBurney. Well, welcome. I have not met you yet, so it's nice to have you.
I'm the new guy.
He is our new gentleman who works with the legislature.
Legislative liaison and public information.
Oh, good. Wonderful. Well, welcome.
Yes, ma'am. I just want to bring you up to speed on things that are moving in the legislature. And the first one, obviously, everybody always asks about is the budget. The budget we're halfway through the budget process right now. It was a very smooth process in the House, about as smooth as I've seen it in a number of years. It passed the House of Representatives on March 13th. The House funded 3 of our legislative priorities that were not in the governor's budget. The first one being the dollar increase for our direct care workers. They also funded our Child Protective Custody Transition Program. That was $140,000 for that, and also $2 million in non-recurring funds to the Greenwood Genetic Center Genomic Data Initiative. So we got that. Budget now heads to the Senate Finance Committee. The Senate Finance subcommittees have been meeting this week. They will meet next week. The Senate Finance Committee is going to start work on the budget. You've got a date of April 2nd to the 4th, and then it should come to the floor 2 weeks after that. So the Senate will begin working on the budget, and we'll be over there in that process, as Mary noted. Also, I have an update on there's some breaking news on the Commissioner Qualifications and Training Bill. That is House 3824. That is in the 3M Social Services, Mental Health and Children Subcommittee. We had, as Commissioner Lamel was there and very kindly sat through, and they ran out of time, but the tanning beds, skin cancer people had a lot of witnesses for tanning beds. But they have, what the committee has done is rescheduled another meeting. This is not on any public calendar right now. I just got this last night. The bill has been rescheduled to be taken up on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, March 26th at 2:30 or 1.5 hours after adjournment. That's how the House runs the schedule there. So between 2:30 and 3, usually.
2:30 and 3.
Yeah, between 2:30 and 3 is what you can usually count on for that, and that'll be back in 427 of the block building. So commissioners, Commissioner Lamel, I've provided the committee with his written testimony. If you're not able to be there, I'm happy to hand deliver written testimony to the committee as well for anybody that can't be there. But just know that that is scheduled, and we'll be there on Tuesday. The next one is House Bill 3825. That is also sponsored by Representative Taylor. That's medical decisions under the Healthcare Consent Act. You heard about that earlier. That's on a different subcommittee, the Health and Environment Subcommittee. We were able to also get a companion bill introduced in the Senate, 529 on February 19th. So it is in the hopper in case we don't make the crossover date for the bill. But we had a subcommittee meeting yesterday and it was productive. Some issues were raised, by the subcommittee regarding the efforts that we make as far as locating family members, in the Adult Health Care Consent Act. I think we can work through those issues in the next week to 2 weeks, and hopefully get a consensus with everybody involved that will be able to move the bill forward. There are also some technical changes that we need to make to the bill related to some other bills that have passed, and some technical changes that we need to make to it. But I think that we're going to have we're going to be able to move that bill forward, hopefully. The next one, last month, we got Ann Dalton gave us a preview of the vulnerable adult abuse registry. She mentioned that, and we had a subcommittee hearing on that. There are a couple of hearings have gone on that, and that's going to be a long-term issue. That's going to take them a lot of time to work through. There's some both due process issues that need to be worked out. That there's some real concerns in the Judiciary Committee about due process, and then there are also some funding issues, particularly at DSS and SLED, because they are asked to take on some heavy lifting in this bill. So they're waiting on some economic impact statements on that, and that's going to take some time. And I'm not sure, and it's going to have an effect on the budget, so I'm not sure that they're going to be able to get it done maybe this session. It may even carry over, but we're going to keep looking at that and working on that. Any questions?
Do you have any questions, Rob?
Thank you for that report. It would be great if we could, especially during session, if we could get one every month.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mary? Okay,
I'm gonna let Pat, since he wrote that document, I'm gonna let him
All right.
give you an update on it.
Strategic plan.
And it says strategic plan. I don't want to confuse anybody. It's not the strategic plan from 2016. It's that letter that went to the Oversight Committee
Good morning. I'll follow up what Mary said, which was the strategic plan was our presentation to the House Legislative Oversight Committee, and it was incorporated in their recommendations. So as a commission to track your fiduciary duty that we are doing what we said we were doing, let me just give you a little bit of an overview, and then I'll jump into the strategic plan. In November of 17, we had the Senate oversight review of DDSN, and that is contained in tab 4 of your binder. And there were 32 recommendations in there, which Mary reported on a couple months ago. And all of them are done up to the extent possible, and what's holding us back is once the Mercer report gets finalized, then we can move forward with the other recommendations. So rather than taking my time to do that, it's in your binder. That's one set of recommendations that we're tracking, and in my opinion, we're on top of waiting for the timing and merger report. In November of 18, the House Legislative Oversight Committee gave us 17 recommendations. And those recommendations, when you look at them, 9 of them had to do with modifying existing state statutes. One of them was the Adult Health Care Consent Act, which Rob has talked about. It's in process. 8 of them were other statutes that we felt would improve our overall efficiency and effectiveness. We have presented them formally to both the House and the Senate's committees that are responsible for DDSN for consideration. There were 3 new laws proposed, one pertaining to positioning DDSN in the state government, one had to do with DSN boards, and one had to do with the criteria to select commissioners. 2 of those 3 are really not in our lane, so we did not address. And as far as the criteria for the commissioners, Representative Taylor has submitted legislation. I don't believe it's actually been presented yet. It has?
On Tuesday.
Tuesday. Okay. And that left, we had 2 what I call specific to-dos. One had to do with direct care training, which I think Mary came up with a marvelous idea of joining with the Department of Education and getting a certification program in the high schools to give students a career waiting upon graduation, as well as the certification training. And another one had to do with commissioner training, which fortunately we have no new commissioners, but I believe part of that is Mary's monthly or 2 or 3 times a month memos on what's going on as far as what else you need to know. The last recommendation for the House is one that basically said, report back on the 44 recommendations that you imposed on yourself and see how you're doing in 6 months. And so I think that's the purpose of this. But I want to give you some assurance that the other ones have not fallen off the radar. So what I'll do is I'll go to the letter that DDSN provided to House Oversight on August 28th, which is in your binder. And the best way I think to go through this is with 44 recommendations. I don't want to go into reading the letter or reading the update, but what I'll do is I'll touch on the topic. I'll summarize what we're doing about it, and then I'll pause for a second and I'll ask you to jump in if you want me to drill down deeper. So we can go to that document and we can go to the first recommendation, which is on page 2. The number 1 recommendation, which is our number 1 problem, is to address the current payment system weaknesses with modification or a new system. We've talked about this many times, and on page 3, the bottom line is we have done 7 things in preparation for the change that are listed there in bullet format, but at the end of the day, we're waiting for the Mercer report, which will give us 2 things. One, a recommendation from an independent consultant on band system, payment system, and possibly different options to go forward. And then the second component of that will be updated rates for all of our service rates. So we've taken that as far as we can until we get the report. Recommendation number 2A has to do with the direct care wage. As Rob said, the dollar recommendation was in fiscal year 2020 budget. The House has incorporated it into their budget, and we're waiting for the Senate's budget here shortly to see if they will support it as well. Recommendation 2B had to do with establishing a career track for direct care. We made a conscious decision not to move forward with that until after we got the dollar increase this year. We're in a situation across the state where I do believe the $12 rate has helped. I see more than just green shoots. When you see Midlands and PD getting close to 100%, that was not the case last year. So it's doing something, but I think the areas of the state where you have, I guess, higher competition for personnel, such as in the upstate and the Charleston area, that's where we're struggling. And I think Witten's rural location doesn't help either. But we have to get that stabilized before we can start talking about career tracks. And so we're going to hold that in abeyance until after the $13, until we get our money right across the board. to maintain an adequate staffing levels. Recommendation 2C had to do about pursuing technology. Part of our strategy is after the Mercer report, as we prepare for a new payment system, which will almost certainly be a form of fee-for-service. In order to do that effectively, we're going to have to hire a subject matter expert who specializes in policies, because when you start offering a fee-for-service model, your liability is generated by the policies surrounding the service. And we'll get a lot of guidance from the Mercer report and HHS, but part of our forward-looking, this is a point in time for DDSN, it's a unique point in time, where we're spending all this time and energy into a payment system. It's our time to look at all of our policies going forward. What is it? Because this is just not a one-year decision, this is probably a decade decision, because we have to build our policies around the reality of current money available and the likelihood of future money available. We have to build our policies around, in the industry, is the availability of direct support workers. With baby boomers upon us, the competition for direct support workers is going to be more and more difficult for our industry. So we have to look at our entire service array at the time we change our payment system. And part of that will be how technology plays a role into our service array. Recommendation 2D, which establish formalized target staffing levels. As Mary said, we've done the research and the cost analysis, and we've established target staffing levels for nurses and DSPs at the regional centers, and Mary gave you the numbers. Some is better than we thought, some is not as good as we thought. At least we can track it on a monthly basis, right down to boots on the ground, so that we can actually measure the progress that we see. An example would be Coastal last month was in the mid 70% staffing level. This month it was at 83%. And so we started looking at that, like, that's really good. They do have some increase in new DSP workers, but that was really driven by Rufus taking a hands-on approach to deal with the crisis at Coastal, and moved a lot of employees who are not normally in service onto the floor in order to provide adequate direct care persons. But I look at that as a success, where in 1 month we were able to see the impact of that decision, where it moved the needle up 8% on more support on the floor. So we're hoping as we go forward, as we do things, we can understand, is it working or not? As far as community residential staffing levels, we'll have to wait for the Mercer report, but there certainly has to be some acuity approach to funding residential settings, so that we are assured that the money that we put out there ends up on staffing on the floor. 2E pertained to re-examine our portfolio services, which was just like 2C. We have an RFP in draft form that once we get the Mercer report, we'll have to send out. Recommendation 2F, which was direct care professional training program. I covered that a little bit earlier, and the other recommendation, where our relationship with the Department of Education and establishing a certification program in high school is just a brilliant idea, and across the board. Community setting opportunities is recommendation 2G. We need more residential housing. We were blessed for a period of 3 or 4 or 5 years where General Assembly provided us residential housing. We implemented. It was able to keep the critical needs list, bring it down, and keep it under control. All those houses are built out. You can see the critical needs list inching up again. And that's a finite resource in our system with great need. Obviously, we try to pursue it through the budget process. We are not successful in the House this year. We asked for 40 beds, we did not get any. The second way we're attacking that issue is, and I'll give Rufus a lot of credit, is he's really brought a sense of rigor, fairness, and equity in assessments to the critical needs list, to make sure that people that get on that list have the highest need and that they do get placed. So under his leadership, the list has actually gone down because of the I would call just more rigor in how we manage the list to make sure it's fair and equitable. And lastly, we have 2 projects that have not gotten started. They're in the concept stage. We have state-funded people at Correct Care, and we also have a youth home that's state-funded. And so what we're going to do is build a model where we can self-finance converting those state-funded positions into CTH capacity to get the Medicaid match. So it takes a little planning, a little bit of cash flow timing, but we can certainly place those people at a third the cost in a better environment. Contingency planning, recommendation 2H, which is about the regional centers. Mary covered that. I think that's something nobody wants to do. But if you look at Witten, its staffing level, since I've been looking at it hard since last September, has been bubbling around 72, 73% of its needed level. Now it's at 70%. And what exacerbates that problem is that 70% staffing is a function of about 55% full-time workers doing overtime, comp time, any kind of time to get to 70. We are exhausting our staff at Witten just to get to 70%. That is the project for this month, and to make some determinations because it can't continue with that level of stress in the system. Issue number 3 is just an overall system process improvement approach. I think I said many times before, our main problem here is just get back to basic management, get back to basic process management, and we have a number of things rolling. One is formal training. We have a...
May I ask one
Sure.
question? You hadn't mentioned the Coastal Center or Salibi, how they're staffing.
Salibi is in the PD, and when they are combined, they're at 95%,
Okay.
and they're going to separate out next month, but I was told that they're both at the 95 percentile.
They're fine, okay. How about the Coastal Center?
Coastal is at 83% in February, but I think that's only because we surged non-direct care into the floor. So that's kind of artificially high, but that's the current status, and it's not a long-term solution. And we have developed a monthly report on hiring that we can provide you. Liz has done a great job on tracking applications and hiring and the time to get people onto the floor.
Can I say one thing? It's not a long-term solution for direct care, but putting supervisors out on the floor in the mix is always going to be our strategy because that's good management. And it needs to be done because that helps with the abuse of neglect and looking at training issues for their staff. They need to be in the mix. They were kind of in their own offices away from their individuals. That had to change. So that's not going back. Okay, sorry.
Recommendation number 3A is establish a formal management training. We have a 15-page curriculum written and a PowerPoint, and Mary announced yesterday that we're going to start training on management training in April. We also can't forget that there was a big push here over the last 4 or 5 months to engage our management staff into personnel management. We were very weak on systematically using the performance appraisal system, which then is an indicator that if you don't have a good performance management system that you follow, it's easy for management not to engage personnel in improving issues. I'll give Liz Lamont a great credit. At the end of February, I think all but a few stragglers are on new performance plans, and everybody's on the same cycle, which will be June 30th of each year. And that'll allow us to train in a systematic way as well as administrative management in a systematic way. Recommendation 3B was redirect audit resources from the community to internal operations. We have a large need for internal audit inside this building. Kevin's team are currently working on the respite program, individual employment program, Medicaid ineligible operational controls. One of the weaknesses we see in our system is maintaining Medicaid eligibility. The VAN system has kind of created a loose approach to following up on Medicaid eligibility. And so we're going to establish a single point of contact to drive all the leakages in the system to follow up on it. I would say starting probably January of next year, we then can have internal audit do our own self audits. But until they really can't do an operational audit until we establish performance measures, standards, and procedures of which we have them. We have practices. It's just we need to solidify them that they're written and focused and streamlined. And I think that just brings a more effective, accountable organization. So we'll start auditing after we do the first part. Recommendation number 4 pertains to the location of ESN, the cabinet agency, and that's just not in our lane. I mean, it's an issue. We've not testified about it. We've not been asked to testify about it. And so that's as far as we can take it. Issue number 5 has to be a systematic approach to performance management. And what we're doing there is we are building out what we started last year, which is an enterprise performance management process. And as commissioners who are volunteers, yet you have the huge fiduciary duty of being responsible for the efficiency and effectiveness organization, this plays a role into you, where we'll be able to provide you reporting monthly and quarterly on all the key aspects of what we do so that you can see what's going on, and it will help the discussions about what's a problem, what's not a problem, and what's in between where there's a lot of noise. Our job is to hopefully sort that out with data so that we can have better conversations, but more importantly, provide that to our own employees as feedback on performance. And the only way an organization gets better is to establish a baseline performance expectations and then let the employees improve upon that. And we're pretty close to that. Formalize a project management process. We've established a SharePoint site. We put all our reporting on there. And when it comes to project management, we've identified the key 5 projects of which we have a formal briefing process to keep all executive management up to date on what's going on with those, so that the different components of this building that work on a single project know what the right hand does and left hand does, and that we can collectively bring our judgment to prevent what I would call either mediocre outcomes or dropping the ball. You guys getting bored? Should I stop? Let you read it later? Keep going. Eva?
Go ahead.
Okay. Number 7 has to do with abuse and neglect, and there's like 6 or 7 recommendations that flow from there. First recommendation had to retool the residential observation audit technique. That is green, that actually should be yellow. We do have that tool, and it is producing results. It just needs to be modified so that we ask better discrete questions and get discrete answers so that we have discrete outcomes. There's too much, ask 19 questions and you get 1 outcome. It creates ambiguity on the results. So we have to modify the tool, but it is a tool. Again, I told you, this is one of our better tools. We're in 25% of the residential housing every year unannounced. And I will jump in here. Well, I have another spot here, but the overarching, the redness in this document, what you'll see, the redness in here is anything that touches abuse and neglect, quality management. When we wrote this, there are areas that we can improve. I think our quality management program is acceptable. I just don't think it's making us better. It's more compliance as opposed to stimulating improvement. And so that's where we want to go as an organization. And so when I look at this redness in here, we've intentionally held a lot of those projects off until the 4th quarter of this year, starting April or May, when we actually can devote time to it to get after this issue. Mary has set up a standing monthly committee for compliance and provider measurements. And we're going to load up on that. And we have to look at the whole program. You just can't look at it in a piecemeal fashion, because at the end of the day, in order to have a better program, I think we got to narrow the focus. I think we have to be compliant with Medicaid waiver. We got to have better measures for the key issues, such as dementia issues that keeps on bubbling around because we're not measuring it in a very specific way. And lastly, we can do this with a lower footprint on providers. I'm convinced of it. I'm convinced of that. So that's the big picture. So on 7A, that will be part of the process. 7B has to do with the continue the NCI tool. We talked about this before, national core indicators. The fiscal year 17-18, year ending 6/30/18 report was published this month. It's on the internet. And I think we're going to get that out today if we haven't already today. Of course, I went right to the 2 questions that have to do with safety. and if you look at those 2 safety questions, we do very, very well. And in one of the questions, we lead the country. Everybody read it. I've not read it all. I wish I could, but I went to the safety questions. And it shows you, when you statistically interview close to 400 consumers and you ask them the same question, 32 other states are asking the same question, so you have a baseline to comparison. It does put the perspective in, hey, our system, all systems across the country have risk of abuse and neglect. How do we mitigate that risk? And this survey shows me that the providers in this state do a really good job, or they lead the country on, at least in this survey instrument, on making their consumers feel safe. Okay. 7C, pursue wage enhancements. That is an abuse and neglect issue. We got to have higher quality personnel, and I already talked about that, but that does tie into an overall strategy to address abuse and neglect. Lessons learned, we sent our first robust quarterly awareness document out to the community in January, which went over all the arrests in fiscal year 18, which was a very high year in arrests. And we provided vignettes and lessons learned. And we need to do that, as Mary said, on a quarterly basis to keep the awareness up. Well, we can train all we want. Nothing's better than all 7,500 DSPs in the system seeing what's going on, because sometimes you get isolated and there's been no bad event in my area for 10 years. People get bad habits. Next thing you know, something stupid happens. We got to keep awareness up and learn from the mistakes across the system so that people don't develop those bad habits. 70 is similar. We're there with the awareness, but we've not, some of the training issues we have are still in the pipeline as far as formal training to the community. Recommendation 7F, which was, this is kind of one that is, I think is important, but it's hard to do in the short term. Part of the abuse and neglect, one of the contributions to abuse and neglect, in my opinion, or our opinion, in the residential setting is a direct support worker's ability to devote time and energy and engagement to the consumer. And we've aggregated these requirements them on over time to the point where they're more worried about a checklist and TheraP than engaging with people. And so we have to revisit that to analyze that. Can we do this in a less intrusive way, still be compliant to provide more time face-to-face with consumers? So I think that's something that needs to be done. We've just not gotten onto it in the short run. Safety bill, 7G is safety bulletins, which we talked about before. And 7H is enhanced A&E program data. We're just saving that for the overall quality management review. And we have a lot of data. We just got to organize it better and action it better. Issue number 8 was to take our statute recommendations to the House Legislative Oversight Committee and get them done. And as I said earlier, that ended up in 9 recommendations, including multiple statutes, one of which is the Adult Health Care Consent Act, and it touches a couple more statutes. And the other 8 we have packaged and provided to the House and Senate committees to take action on them. Again, some people will action it, some people won't. Rob's job is to keep nudging them forward to, and none of these 8 that are sitting are dramatically impacting us, but we do need to take care of them. But certainly the Adult Health Care Consent Act is front and center, and that needs to get addressed one way or another. Number 9, 9A recommendation was
Want to just hit on the highlights?
yeah. Let me speed it up. Put it this way. When I get to number 9, the first 8 were the bigger issues. Number 9 are all the little things along the way. And if you fan number 9, there's a lot of green, there's a lot of yellow, and the red in there are the areas that touch quality management that have just been held off until we can do it all at once. So.
Well, number 9, you know, goes back to the funding strategy for high-need consumers. So we had said that we were going to do 6 homes about last year. Right. And I think one, and DDSN was going to operate these homes, and one was turned over to Sumter. Another one was going to be, I believe the date on that was December of 2018. It was supposed to be in Lauren.
Mm-hmm.
So has that happened?
I'll tell you what, I'm gonna look to the bullpen, and I got Rufus right there with the answer.
2 homes in Sumter, 3 beds each, and then the 1 home in Lawrence.
Is operational.
Yes, it's been licensed, and it's, individuals have been targeted to transition, as Mary mentioned.
Yeah, 2 from Redmond and 2 from the critical needs list.
Originally, it was gonna be a 3-bed home, that's gonna be 4. The other homes in Sumter are
So how many people have we've opened 3 homes. We've placed how many people?
6.
Well, and this will be 10.
10. With the 4, it'll be 10.
Okay, so is the plan now to continue to develop and turn them over to providers? Did we go back to the plan to just run them ourselves?
Yeah, it was never, I'm not aware of a plan for six homes, it was 9 slots or 9 beds. And then,
I think this is the last,
Maybe a new plan.
my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the last money from all the enhancements that we've had, that we promised to do.
Yeah.
And there was a group of homes where we were having a hard time finding providers to take high management people. So the idea was, we'll just do it ourselves, which is Plan B. Plan A is provider. And I think part of it is transitioning to a provider is the best of all worlds, rather than us doing it. And I think Rufus has been able to transition them to providers where maybe a year and a half ago when we planned this, providers weren't willing to do it. So that might have to do with more with Rufus's charm and good looks than planning, but we've been able to move it forward. And we need to be providers. We did it as a last resort, and the fact that we're moving them out to a provider is in the best interest for DDSN.
You know, this whole thing kind of comes together with the stuff we were talking, when we were talking about the mentor review process and finding a system of integrating behavior supports into the plans, having expectations for these programs versus just saying we're going to open a program for high management. And then also, it was kind of sitting waiting for the rate setting to be done so we can have that acuity rate built in. And then as a person, instead of looking at high management as the be-all and end-all for an individual, that's where they go, that's where they stay forever, we look at a high management placement from a troubled area, if it's coming out of jail or if it's coming out of a family situation, and we're as an acute setting to where we help somebody gain the skills they need to go out to where providers are not, we don't have to call them high management anymore. So to do that effectively, a couple things have to happen. We need rates that are going to be based on acuity, so we can match all of the money that's coming, and we're not just handing out outliers of cash. That's not a good way to do this. And then over time, as people gain skills and they're ready to move to a less restrictive environment, we can actually start lowering that acuity and opening up the bed here. I don't know if we need to be in the constant mode of opening more and more and more high management homes. What we need to be in the mindset of is, how do we get the people in high management homes to gain the skills to move out of the high management homes?
So when you go and make that report, that 6-month report, in responding to that recommendation, I would suggest you have a lot more strategy and a lot more detail than what you just said, because it lays out a broad brush, but you're gonna have some dates and some specific methods that you're going to address it instead of doing it this way. If you're not gonna focus on high management homes, and I'm not saying you shouldn't.
No. I'm not that we're not gonna focus on them, but we just gotta give them some expectation of what they need to do, because when we did the the mentor observations, we noticed that there didn't seem to be an expectation of what's supposed to go on with this person, whether with regards to training, to planning, to supervision, to anything, actually. It was basically, what I don't want to do is build high management homes with people to say, just take my people, please. I want to have a good treatment plan for somebody so that they actually improve their lives, not that they stay there. We have a lot of detail on that. And we're gaining more of it as we're going through this mentor audit. We're kind of putting all that together.
This is gonna be kind of one of the things I think they're gonna be asking.
But I guess when we did this whole entrance into this, it came to be more of a, look, we're noticing that we're not doing the basics here, and that we need to do more than just put somebody in a quote high management home. we need to help them get out of that label of high management into something that is sustainable over the course of a lifetime.
And we've talked that to death for about 3 years, and we have taken no action to do that.
Well, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
All right, Mary,
Okay. All right, I'm gonna get up, because where's Lori?
Lori's like,
Oh, she's, okay.
she's flying to Boston as we speak.
That's a quick run to the airport. I'm going to stand up so my head isn't all swivel. It's kind of hard to do. Oops, sorry. Okay, I'm just gonna do an update on BabyNet and case management. And I'm gonna start with EI and case management. We're gonna start with BabyNet because BabyNet is not our program. It is not First Steps program anymore, it belongs to HHS. And they're going to go fee for service starting July 1. I do want you to know, when it comes to early intervention, private providers are already fee for service at the rate they're currently getting, and they seem to be fairly prosperous. We have quite a few EI providers. In fact, according to our survey and our review and basically telephone calls with providers, we have found that we are a little bit concerned about Hampton County being a little thin on EI providers, but everywhere else there are a lot of EI providers. So Director Baker has completed 4 regional trainings for providers on how to enroll with Medicaid and how to get their billing process started. And I attended 2, and they were there was a lot of questions, which he answered. And so BabyNet children under 36 months will bill direct to Medicaid, and 36 to 6, if DDSN eligible and in need of EI services, will bill direct to us, and they will get paid fee for service at the same rate of the BabyNet children. We will resume our EI committee meetings on the 2nd Wednesday of the month, and again, we just offer technical assistance. They kind of share ideas. It's just like an open forum. And DDSN continues to offer technical assistance to providers as they ask. And again, I remind you that private providers are already doing fee for service and billing and early intervention. Okay, case management. That seems to be the big hullabaloo about case management. All right, so we're just going to start just as a refresher. The change to case management billing was originally established quite some time ago. We kind of did some research and made sure we had the dates, because I got recollections, but at my age, recollections aren't always that great. The beginning goes back to 2012, a few Medicaid state directors ago. And in 2012, HHS under Tony Keck submitted a state plan amendment to CMS, which requested moving all market targeted case management to market rates. The rates were developed with HHS, DDSN, and providers sitting at the table. 2 rates were developed, one for Medicaid targeted case management, and later on, one for that waiver case management service that was being developed. The plan required provider MTCM cost-based rates to be incrementally reduced with new blended rates over a 30-month period starting on 1/1/13. That's when we started the blended clock, so to speak. These new blended rates were to be gradually implemented, starting with a blended rate composed of 75% cost-based, 25% market rate. This rate would drop incrementally to 50/50, 25/75, till you finally got to 100% full market rate of $20 a unit for a face-to-face visit and $15 for all other type of contacts. And at the end of 30 months, which was July 1, 2015, we were to be at the 100% market rate. That's when it was set for. Now, remember that market targeted case management was the only service available, so all of our cases, including those in the waiver, fell under that category. During this time, the amendment for waiver case management was submitted and actually was approved long before the SPA was approved, and the services just were never implemented. It was just sort of put up on a shelf. It's not to say that we weren't going through and reading the manual. We were going through and we were actually writing, I was on a team, I believe Beth was on a team, to actually write the training modules. A lot of the modules were already videotaped by Blue Cross Blue Shield, did all this work, and the tests were written. And I think we had done about 10 or 11 modules to get the training done, and then it all stopped. There are significant differences in waiver case management and NTCM. So a DHH went ahead and established that second rate. It was established in the same manner with providers and DDSN and HHS staff at the table. The rate is $25.20 for a face-to-face and $15.50 for office. This rate was established in October 2013 and expected to be implemented 7/1/2014. However, since waiver case management was not implemented, the rate was never instituted and everything sort of went dark. And I was a provider then, and I was waiting to introduce the service, and we were working on our rate to increase our billing, and then all talk stopped from everybody. Medicaid directors changed, meeting schedules diminished, so our contact as provider organizations just absolutely dried up with HHS during that time. Prior to the spring of 2018, we were doing, I guess it was just between 2012 and 2013, we were making concentrated efforts to increase our billing. But when all communication stopped about productivity, the word was hardly ever heard again. And I'm just speaking for myself as a provider. I did not know that DDSN was billing Medicaid in units. I figured they were billing them in that monthly rate like we were getting. I had no clue that this unit rate was still going on, but we were not made aware of that as providers. So communication was a problem there. And we sort of let it go and went on to bigger and better things that we were worried about. So, and you know, that's what we were doing. We were worried about all that blended rate, and we were working on it, and then we stopped. But I think it was April, I read the minutes of commission meetings. I think that it was April of 2018. Pat Malley came and told you all that the SPA had been approved, and we now had to start going to this unit rate. And that I was sitting in the audience, and that's when I heard this. So HHS's initial desire, according to Pat, was to start on 7/1/2018. That was tough. And that was 3 months after you guys got notified that the SPA had been approved. So that desire kind of went by the board, and HHS provided DDSN latitude to kind of start the machine up again and get providers' efficiency moving ahead again. And without a deadline, but according to Josh, when I got here, Josh Baker, Director Baker, he wanted to talk about 1/1/2019 as a startup date. Well, at that point, my message to him was, you can't institute the waiver case management rate if you ain't got waiver case management. So we need to build that service back in, and he wanted to tighten definitions and all this kind of stuff. So his team was working on it. I said, well, we can't have one without the other. And I said, what about April? I didn't say that. He said April 2019. And I'm like, why don't we wait to the end of the fiscal year? And because you still don't have waiver case management developed. And we need time to train it. We need time to train it, and we need time to, get the system ready for this. We need to be training people and talking to people. And so that's how the date came up at 7/1/2019. And even though we've had discussions about this and we're developing an actual service, waiver case management service and implementation, the SPA was approved. CMS is expecting that rate to be paid. So between then until we finally get to be billing this rate, liability is building on us as an agency. So that July 1st date was a mutually agreed upon based on the need of waiver case management to be developed as an actual service, and that we can actually implement it.
Mutually agreed upon between you and Josh. When you say mutually agreed upon, who mutually agreed?
Yeah, it was us, because I was trying to push the date out as far as I possibly could. And if we didn't have a service, I still couldn't understand how you could bill waiver case management if you didn't have waiver case management. So we needed the service. The current state of the provider network, we have sent out surveys. We're covered. We have a couple things we need to do is to look at our own RFP process, because we are being asked by providers, how do I expand into other counties? We have a laborious, I don't know if anyone's ever done an RFP for DDSN, but it takes time and effort. And we have folks that the private providers need to do it because they're not known to us. We don't know who they are, if they're coming in for another state or we don't know who they are. So we need all those documents. But the boards have been providing services for years. And as Susan said, some of them are providing Husky services in other areas. And so we know they can provide these services. We need to figure out a way to be able to facilitate the growth of the folks who want to do services in other areas and make it a little bit easier. We also want to talk about that chart we've been sending out just a little bit, that we say we never can get to 100%. Well, what providers have now as a tool to evaluate their break-even point. What is the percentage in that chart that they need to actually break even? And I believe it puts a different perspective on, because every provider is different. So you can't judge the whole network by the same chart. My overhead might be different in York than another county has. We might have people that worked for us for 30 years and their salaries are a little bit higher or quite a bit higher than other providers, so their overhead is higher. We have folks that choose to have a supervisor when they only have 2 other case managers. That might not be a good thing. That supervisor might need to have a caseload. So they have to evaluate, when we talk about a business model, you have to look at your overhead. Are they getting admin support? When we do mostly everything on computer now. So those are things they might not need. But anyway, the break-even points vary between providers based on overhead, management, and whether they carry that high state plan, like the retirement and the health insurance and all the holidays. So it was easier for us. We're finding that the break-even point is between 50 and 60%. So we do have people that are billing over their break-even point now. When people want to get out of the business, yeah, we do have a contract. So we have language in there that tells you how you need to transition out of your contract. So our survey shows that we have an adequate number of additional providers in each county for both case management and EI. A little more for EI because it's been so lucrative for private providers, and but a little thin on EI coverage in Hampton County. Our survey has also shown we have a few boards who are willing to expand into other counties. So we're looking at that RFP process as I don't want it to be a stumbling block. I want it to facilitate new providers, not bar them. We've developed a case transition process. We've already used it. This Easter Seals has closed their doors and we use the transition process. So there is literally a written process on how these are the steps you do. Lawrence County has stopped doing case management for their direct service people, and they had a provider fair and they transitioned the cases. We're going through with Darlington County now, transitioning cases, and it seems to be a process that's working well. Remember that, again, when we're looking at, well, if I have a new agency and I want to come in and take over a county, where am I going to find qualified workers? Well, if a board goes out of business in case management, they're going to have to let go of their entire department. And that entire department has case managers that are qualified. So there is a pool of applicants there if the new provider chooses to use them. But if they've been low billers, they might not choose to use them. So if it's a good fit, the opportunity is there. We're looking into possible prospective step-down rates for the first quarter, but it's going to have financial implications for DDSN. We have what was the other thing I wanted to talk to you about? Oh, we have managed to get a couple things changed with HHS. And Susan's right, they don't have the waiver case management manual yet. but we have been telegraphing for well over a year, because I was a provider then and I knew what was in the manual, that you're gonna have more visits, because you have to do quarterly face-to-face rather than twice a year. You have to do monthly contact. You cannot have any months with no contact. So the opportunity to bill more is built into the waiver case management service. There was a lot of hullabaloo when HHS changed the way face-to-face is going to be billed. They called it $25 face-to-face with travel. So if you were going to go to a workshop or a residential facility and you were going to see 4 people, that you were only allowed to charge $25 for that first person, and the rest of the people were only going to be at $15, well, they've reversed that decision. So you can charge $25 for each one of those folks. What you cannot do is have group case management, where you get everybody together and you spend the same hour, but you bill an hour for each person. You can't do that. But you can spend 4 hours there and talk to your folks and charge $25 a unit. That unit rate is between $600 and $1,000 a quarter with the 40 units that you're allowed to use in a quarter. Right now, we only pay them $420 a quarter, no matter how good they are. But before I take questions, I want to give you a couple of little thoughts that I have. We've been preaching the new waiver case management, and we have been given the requirements that are in there, the additional requirements that are in there. We've added a few more things, like we're now going to be able to transition out of hospitals, where we used to just do that for free. That's something we negotiated. If you can transition out of an ICF, why can't you transition out of a hospital, which is basically an institution, and be able to bill for all that stuff you do, and services can start right away. We put the care plan into the actual service, which is your highest billing time. We're incorporating new person-centered thinking, and all that training's being done over the next 3 months, where you have to work on a document with the family so you get to know them better. Another great billable activity. And not to mention, it'll increase the quality of services for our families, which is ultimately what we're going for here. So I agree that they don't have the manual in hand, but every time we learn of a new requirement, we are telling people what it is. So for a year, we've been preaching the new waiver case management services have double the requirements, which makes monthly contact and quarterly face-to-face visits mandatory. So we had told people, and I know this because I was a provider at the time, we were told, start acting like this is waiver case management and just increase the number of contacts with people to a monthly basis so that we can see a natural progression of billing, because we're increasing the amount of requirements in there. But I have a funny feeling about something, because everybody I talk to is, we're so compliance driven. We have to be compliant. Well, if they're feeling they're compliance driven now, are they sticking to the current requirements? So went ahead and pulled a year sample analysis. We pay people $138 a month prospectively. So I don't know if they billed or not billed in that chart that entire month. Okay, so I'm giving them the money up front. So over a year and the number of cases we have, that's 140,412 possible billing months. 12 times the number of cases and all that. And then when we actually looked at how many months were actually billed, it was 103,583. Which means 36,529 possible billing months were not billed. They did not have an activity. So there was nothing for us to send over to HHS to get reimbursed for. But they got to keep the $138. So basically there's no service note for those 36,000 months, which comes to 26.2% of the cases. That translates, when you put a dollar sign on it, to $5 million, $41,002 in a year.
You're saying we're leaving on the table?
I think, well, yes. That is not being matched to an actual billable service. So when I look at this, we're talking about quality of family care. And I always doubted the stat that HHS gave us. So, I'm like, no, we talk to people more than just 6 hours an entire year. Of course we do. We don't. And this is after a year of telling people the new requirements are monthly contacts. Some people are doing it, obviously, but not everybody is. So when July 1 comes in, waiver case management is coming in. They're going to have to do monthly contact. Which again, I look at quality of service for our folks and the families that are out there. Our family needs us. We need to be helping them find those respite sitters, not just giving a whole stack of papers and saying, here, choose from this group of providers. We can be developing wonderful sets of data based on the satisfaction interviews that case managers have with their families on, well, when you get your incontinence supplies every month, are they coming on time? You're getting the right amounts? Because when I needed incontinence, not for me, but for the kids, not yet. I went ahead and I got a whole stack. There's tons of providers of these services in the state. And I just said, I'll just give me the first three, start with the first three, because I don't have time to research every one of these people. And the question I asked, well, who does the family like the most? I didn't get an answer. Boards and providers can develop that kind of database. I mean, I don't buy something off of Amazon without reading the reviews. And yet we don't have any of that for our folks. So there's a lot of potential for better service here. And then one more thing. Well, that basically says we paid $5 million for nothing. Now, one other thing. We bill Medicaid targeted case management for people who are not in the waiver. And those payments go out to providers retrospectively in a unit rate. Okay? Currently, they get $20 and $15. They get that lower rate. So last February, the number of consumers receiving Medicaid targeted case management was 1,720. Not a lot. And the providers billed $54,000 for it. February 2019, providers billed $116,245 for Medicaid targeted case management. How many more people were enrolled? You probably think a lot of people were enrolled. No. 1,757 people were enrolled. That's an increase of 2.11%. Number of people. But the billing increased 115%. Unit billing. You can see the unit billing for the entire year is just going up every month. So when you have to get paid by that rate, you bill. Any questions?
Vicki and Sam?
No. I do want to make a statement to some providers out there, though, that I just don't feel like there's any point in me saying anything here today because I don't think it will change anything. But I am working on it, and I would urge you not to make any career changes or give up on the idea of managing of providing case management services in your county just yet.
I also firmly believe that this could be a prosperous change for people who want to work. This is about serving our families and the potential now to earn more by working more is there. Plain and simple. And if I was a provider today and I had a vacancy, I'd fill it.
Thank you, Mary.
I have some questions.
You do? Okay.
All right, so one thing we heard from Susan earlier was about Haskell given a sort of a separate thing because of the difficulty with that, and there was a pool of money that she was receiving as a stipend with regard to that, that amounted to about $10,000 a year. Where did those funds come from that we were paying?
I would just imagine, just like everything else around here, it's been coming out of the system. Yeah, every time that question gets asked, it was just basically because of the way the bands are. And as Ms. Harrison said, DHHS reimburses us at a higher rate than it's going out to providers, that it's just coming out of the system. But, in New York, we provided Haskell service to Cherokee County, and it wasn't that difficult to provide. And we've also had a couple of counties say they now want to do Haskell. Again, that RFP is an issue. So we're going to see how we can get around that.
But the issue is that
There was a stipend, yes.
there was a stipend that was developed because a need was seen to have it. At some point in time, somebody decided that because of this being a subset, it was needed. Okay. Is there any provision within the new system to have a similar sort of situation where a need is seen because of hours of travel and distance involved?
I'll tell you what Pat and I have discussed, and Director Baker has discussed, that I think that's perfectly open to discussion. That if we have a need that and if we have a problem in Hampton with EI, it's going to be talked about. The difference is this 2515 is a pass-through rate. We're not taking anything off of the top of that. What the rate is published, the provider's going to get. We'll be working with our admin contract for this admin that we have. We may have to subsidize a small rural county or somebody who has to travel far and we can't get other providers to, but that subsidy will be open and honest. It will not be a deal under the table, and that's where we're going with it. Yes, that has been discussed, that there probably is going to be a need. I think rural hospitals have to do it now to keep open.
And why don't we, in every job, not doing it 30 years, but why don't they pay you a rate for travel? Why isn't that extra?
They are paying the $25 versus $15. 25 is for travel. Yeah, we have to travel.
But the hours in travel are billable hours.
But
It's
see,
only the
that's not
time
billable.
face-to-face,
If
right?
you travel for, like today.
Yeah, but it was built into the rate even when they discussed the rate. They put extra.
They put extra dollars for that, but it doesn't seem,
Okay,
can I, Hampton County lately? You can go from one side of Hampton County.
Well, I worked in
2 hours.
Greenville County. It took me an hour to go, to Travelers Rest from Fountain Inn. However, I also have a whole bunch of consumers that are within 3 minutes.
Right, I understand.
So what they look at is the average. So for every 2-hour drive a person has to do, they're doing probably 15 or 20 that are a 5 or 10 minute drive. And it has to do with, but that was part of the rate, and supervision was part of the rate, and vacations and yachting, all that kind of stuff. But I don't see why, and Director Baker was honest about this too, there might be times where we have to subsidize to make sure services exist in a county. But as long as that subsidy is not something like, oh, we're gonna pay this person's rate, or we're gonna change bands just so somebody's stable, we're gonna do it open and honest so everybody knows why we're doing what we're doing.
And and that's obviously a big concern that I think we should have, is to make sure that it's not, that there is a level of flexibility. And again, everyone wants it to be above board.
Right.
But we've already had some of that in the past, where we've had that flexibility to say something needs to be done to address this.
Right.
We as a commission need to make sure that that ability is still present even with the new payment system. And that's where we need to make sure that something is that something is in place to make sure that we're meeting our responsibility to make sure that those services are still getting done.
And we're running scenarios as to how we might implement that subsidy. Was it across the board, or do we start with like a step-down prospective payment to see what the financial impact is on us? If we wait till 2020, the financial impact is close to $9 million.
Right, you're talking about waiting to implement.
Right, if we just go ahead and continue paying the way we're paying, but we get paid the market rate, we're going to lose a lot of money. But we might be able to do a step down to help with cash flow in the initial months for those who want it. So, a percentage, and step it down over a quarter or over 6 months, or however we can afford it. Because remember, every time we subsidize one thing, we're probably going to hinder the development of something else.
And I think that's a trade-off that
You have to make.
we need to be aware of.
Yes.
And ultimately sort of we're responsible for, which is why I think we need to have those updates on how we're doing it over, as we're going through the system.
And we didn't ask for folks to make a plan to burden them. We asked them to make a plan to stimulate their thought process. So, and I think it became clear after the human service providers held their little it wasn't little because it was large. It was like standing room only, if I remember correctly. When they held their meeting, I wasn't there, I was a report, but that there was a few case managers in that room who acted like they never heard this before. And that worries me that their management, I mean, obviously, we've been hearing about it since 2012. So if management's not informing their staff, that's not fair to those case managers, frankly. It's a hard enough job. So, and it's one I've done. And in my head, I've already figured out how I would be doing this. So I would hope that managers have in their head how they would be doing it. And all they need is to put it on paper. And the best part of that is some people have better ideas than others, and they can be shared.
Mary, thank you. We'll talk about it later.
I have one more question.
Can you talk with her later, because I got 10 minutes, and then we're out of here. I'm sorry, we've been talking about it for 30 minutes.
Yes, ma'am. I'll be brief.
You can ask her afterwards.
I don't want to give credit to the folks in the field, action in the items that Pat talked about. In reference to cameras, we've executed a purchase order for Code Links out of North Charleston to install cameras at Coastal Center with in the amount of $64,589.22. The order's in process. They should have the hardware in 3 weeks, and we've been told the installation will take up to 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yep. Yep, with respect to,
Okay, that's the first one. When's the next one?
well, we'll mitigate them as fast as we can.
Okay.
We want to go ahead and get the hardware in and test it at the centers and get all the informed consent process nailed down. And then we'll go ahead and migrate it to all the regional centers. With respect to community providers, Susan did some work on that. It's in tab 5 of the notebook. So if you have questions relative to the questions that you asked from the policy committee meeting, I'm going to defer to Susan because she did the legwork on coming up with the research. Okay. Any questions on installing cameras in our regional centers? We're excited about it. Our parents are excited about it, and the folks that we serve. We
So
hope
you
it's going
think
to be.
about April 1 we'll have them?
It's going to take 3 weeks to come in, so I'm thinking maybe by May 1.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions about cameras? All right, Lisa. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Was going to direct you to tab 6 in your notebooks, but Mr. McBurney has covered the budget update for me, so we're in good shape. Tab 7 is about the expenditures as of February 28th of 2019. We are 8 months through the fiscal year, or approximately 67% of the year. We have spent $479 million dollars. We're right on target. Overall, we're on track to meet our obligations this fiscal year. Our revenues are on track. Staff are focusing on fine-tuning the revenues, increased monitorship of all areas, and heightened scrutiny over all things financial. This is the time of the year where we really bear down and look at everything, expenses and revenues. We should end the year, as we presented to you in September, somewhere between $1.7 and $2 million. And the last piece of that's good news is we have the cost reports for fiscal year 16 bound and ready to send over to HHS today.
Which one? 16?
Fiscal 16.
Great.
Yes. Had Trina Richardson, our staff member, finalized those yesterday.
Wonderful, that's fabulous. So you're gonna do the next one, you're starting on 2017?
Well, actually, they are starting on 17, and then they'll back up and do 13, 14, and 15, and then 18. They'll kind of all be done simultaneously.
Wonderful, that's great.
So, any questions?
Anybody have any questions?
Thanks.
All right, would you go ahead and ask your question? You got 10 minutes.
We're on that part of the agenda.
All right.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure.
Thank you to Deborah and Colleen for all the hard work they've done, because Sandra's been out. They've had to take care of the commission meeting, and they also did the nice decorations that we've had.
Y'all, that ends our meeting. Gary doesn't ask this other question, so I'm sorry that I stopped him, but I made a commitment that we would always end by 12, because at last year's meeting, when I realized at 12:15 it was the commissioners were left, so I'm sorry about that. Our next regular meeting will be April 18th, 2019, and that's adjourned.